My name is Clara Vance. I'm 30 years old, and exactly 1 month before my brother's company launched its biggest commercial project, he emailed me a document titled *5 Conditions for Your Partnership*. I assumed it was a joke until I opened the attachment and saw a numbered list. At the bottom, he had written, "Sign these and maybe you'll be worthy of sitting at the VIP table." Our parents were copied. Neither defended me. My mother replied with a clapping emoji, and finally, "You're supporting his dream." My brother demanded my professional license, a $50,000 cash injection, the deed to our inherited coastal land, my public endorsement of his structural designs, and my signature on a liability transfer document I had never agreed to review. He also expected me to smile brightly at his gala while he presented himself as the visionary genius our family had always pretended he was. I read the list twice, laughed, closed my laptop, and booked a flight to a quiet cabin in the Swiss Alps. Before leaving, I sent one partnership gift inside a matte black briefcase. My brother believed it contained the signed liability transfer and the land deed, so he arranged to open it on stage during his keynote presentation in front of his investors, his fiancée's wealthy family, our relatives, and nearly 500 industry guests. When he unlocked the briefcase and saw the first page, his face went completely gray. Then his lead investor took the document from his trembling hands and read the sentence he had spent 8 months trying to hide. "Before I tell you what happened when the screens went dark and the real blueprints appeared, tell me, what time is it where you are? Where are you listening from? And what is the weather like there? Does it match your mood today? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel." My brother's name was Julian, and for most of my life, my family treated his failures as learning opportunities and my achievements as resources he was entitled to use. Julian was 34, charismatic when he needed a loan, apologetic only when the bank called, and always surrounded by people explaining why his latest business collapse was just a stepping stone. Our parents, Arthur and Deanne, called him a visionary. I called him a liability with a trust fund. I learned that pattern when I was 19. Julian took out a student loan in my name because his credit was ruined, promising he would pay it back before graduation. He didn't. He bought a sports car, crashed it into a storefront, and our parents paid for the damages so he wouldn't lose his confidence. I spent my 20s paying off that loan while Julian started his third, revolutionary startup. I became a licensed structural engineer and architect. I worked 80-hour weeks, passed my boards, and built a reputation for absolute precision. Julian, on the other hand, dropped out of business school and founded Vance Horizon Asterisk, a commercial development firm. Our parents said refusing to invest would crush his spirit. I had a stable, high-paying job at a top engineering firm in Seattle, so everyone assumed I could afford to be his safety net. He didn't ask for money directly at first. He asked for consulting. He needed my name on his pitch decks to prove his company had licensed engineers on staff. I refused. Then he started using my old college projects in his portfolio without permission. When I confronted him, he laughed and said I was being territorial. "We're a team, Clara," he said. "Your success is my success." Our parents agreed, telling me I needed to be more supportive. That was my compromise to preserve family peace. I ignored his theft, although peace always meant Julian looked successful while I swallowed the frustration. His fiancée, Alina Rostova, entered the picture 2 years ago. Alina was sharp, came from a family that owned a massive European logistics empire, and managed her family's real estate investments in the US. She seemed genuinely interested in Julian's eco-friendly development concepts, but Julian carefully controlled what she knew about his actual qualifications. According to him, his previous failed businesses were just beta tests for Vance Horizon. Our parents were retired and comfortable, and I was supposedly secretly funding his operations because I believed in his vision. None of that was true. When Julian announced that Vance Horizon was finally launching its flagship project, a massive, multi-million-dollar eco-resort on the Oregon coast, the company's valuation skyrocketed. Alina's family agreed to match the primary investment, but they required strict due diligence. There were galas, investor mixers, and endless press releases. Whenever our mother described the arrangements, she spoke as if Julian had personally engineered every beam and calculated every load-bearing wall. I knew Alina's family was providing the capital, but Julian repeatedly claimed he was the sole mastermind behind the structural design. 1 month before the official launch gala, he casually asked me to review his final structural reports. I refused, citing my firm's non-compete and conflict of interest policies. He smiled and said he understood. 3 weeks later, the email with the 5 conditions arrived. The first condition required me to officially sign on as the chief structural partner of Vance Horizon, transferring all legal liability for the Oregon Resorts Foundation to my personal license. The second required me to wire $50,000 to the company account as my buy-in for the VIP family table at the gala. The third ordered me to sign over the deed to our grandmother's coastal land in Maine, which Julian claimed he needed to leverage for a secondary loan. The land was left specifically to me. The fourth condition stated that I had to wear a specific designer dress chosen by Alina's stylist, attend without a +1, and publicly shake hands with the lead investors, smiling for the press. The fifth required me to read a prepared statement at the gala, admitting that my initial doubts about the resort's design were unfounded, and praising Julian for his genius-level engineering. Beneath the list, Julian wrote, "There will be no negotiation. This is the biggest night of my life, and I won't allow your jealousy to contaminate it." Dad replied 12 minutes later, "Your brother has worked too hard for this. Just sign the papers and make him proud." Mom added, "Do these 5 things, and we can finally stop fighting about your lack of support." I stared at the messages until my jaw stopped aching from clenching. Then I opened the attached liability transfer. It did more than just put my name on the resort. Buried on page 6 was a clause stating that I acknowledged and approved all prior geological surveys and material purchases made on behalf of Vance Horizon. The language was deliberately broad. Julian was not simply asking me to take responsibility for the future. He was trying to make me legally responsible for decisions I hadn't even known were made. I forwarded everything to my best friend, David Chen, with one sentence: "Tell me I'm not crazy for thinking this is a trap." David called immediately. He had known me since grad school and never confused Julian's charm with competence. He worked as a forensic accountant for a federal regulatory agency. When he reached the clause about prior geological surveys, his tone changed. He understood how dangerous vague language inside a liability transfer could be. He told me not to sign, reply, or warn Julian that I was suspicious. Then he asked whether I had checked the public building permits for the Oregon site recently. I had not. I logged into the county registry while he stayed on the phone. The commercial permits looked normal on the surface. Then I noticed the name of the lead geological surveyor. It was an LLC called *Apex Ground Truth*. I searched the state business registry. Julian was listed as the managing member. My name did not appear publicly, but the address connected to the inquiry was my old apartment, a place Julian had a key to and had visited often. David told me to pull the actual soil reports. I used my professional credentials to request the full geotechnical files from the county. When they arrived, my blood ran cold. The soil composition at the resort site had a high liquefaction risk. The foundation design Julian had submitted was rated for solid bedrock, not coastal sand. David told me to call a lawyer. I contacted Sarah Jenkins, a senior partner at a construction litigation firm. Sarah instructed me to send every document and avoid speaking to my family. With my authorization, she contacted the state licensing board. They confirmed that someone had submitted digital structural sign-offs for the Oregon project using my professional engineer seal. The original submissions were dated 8 months ago. Sarah arranged an emergency video meeting. The digital files appeared to contain a scanned copy of my signature, my PE stamp, and a statement claiming I had personally inspected the site and approved the concrete mixture. I had never visited the site. I had never seen the concrete mixture. The transaction history for the project showed payments to a subcontractor that Julian owned, who was supplying substandard, uncured concrete. There were also payments to Julian's personal credit card and a luxury yacht lease. The liability transfer he demanded could have allowed him to argue that I had retroactively approved those illegal expenses. My signature would not erase the fraud, but it would make me the legal scapegoat when the building inevitably failed inspection. Suddenly, all 5 conditions made sense. The $50,000 would cover his personal debts. The land deed would give him collateral to flee the country. The liability transfer would put me in prison when the foundation cracked. The humiliating dress and controlled appearance would keep me visible, but silent. The public apology would create witnesses who heard me validate his fake engineering credentials. Julian had designed a weekend in which I would help him commit massive fraud and then take the fall for it. While Sarah spoke, another message appeared on my phone. I know you opened the email. Mom is already stressed, so don't punish her with one of your dramatic silences. Sign everything tonight and wire the money tomorrow. If you refuse, I'll make sure Alina's family knows you're trying to sabotage my engagement because you've always been jealous of my success. That sentence should have hurt. Instead, it clarified everything. Julian depended on shame. He knew I hated public conflict and that our parents could control me by calling boundaries selfish. He expected me to protest privately and eventually surrender to keep the peace. I took a screenshot and sent it to Sarah. The next morning, I formally reported my PE seal as compromised to the state board, froze my personal assets, and filed a police report for identity theft. Julian expected an emotional argument. I was building a federal case. Mom called 6 times. Her messages shifted from sweetness to anger. First, she claimed Julian's conditions were necessary because I had been cold and unsupportive. Then she said families should not keep score when someone is chasing a dream. Later, she warned that my absence would humiliate our parents in front of the Rostovas. Her final voicemail asked how she had raised a daughter capable of destroying her brother's life's work. I almost called back. My old instinct was to explain, calm her, and accept enough blame to restore peace. Instead, I listened again to Julian's message. I won't allow your jealousy to contaminate it. Our parents had sharpened that weapon every time they asked me to sacrifice my reputation, so he wouldn't face the consequences of his own incompetence. That evening, David came over with food and found me sitting beside an open suitcase. Years earlier, I had planned a trip to the Swiss Alps after passing my PE boards, but Julian's logistics company had missed payroll. I used my vacation savings to cover his driver's paychecks and told myself I would travel later. I never did. David looked at the suitcase. Are you actually going? I opened my laptop, selected a flight leaving 2 days before the gala and clicked purchase. Yes, I said, but first I'm sending him exactly what he asked for. I did not mean I would send the money, sign the liability transfer, or surrender the land deed. Julian had demanded a presentation large enough to prove my loyalty to the investors, and I had found something more valuable than cash, the truth about what he had built. Sarah warned me not to turn an active fraud case into a reckless public revenge stunt. I agreed. I would not contact the press, publish accusations, or distribute private records to the media. Everything inside the gift would be a document Julian had forged, a message he had sent, or a legal notice relevant to the people he was deceiving. Julian had already announced in the investor group chat that his brilliant engineer sister would present the couple and the company with the final signed liability transfer and the land deed. He described it as the Vance family's ultimate commitment to the project and scheduled the gift presentation on stage, right before his keynote speech. He expected a standing ovation. I ordered a matte black briefcase with a brass lock. Inside, I placed a heavy folder. The first page was a letter addressed to Julian. The second was the state licensing board's official notice of my compromised PE seal, detailing the forged digital sign-offs. The third was the independent forensic soil report proving the severe liquefaction risk at the Oregon site. The fourth was the financial trail showing his payments for substandard, uncured concrete. The fifth was a cease and desist order regarding the use of my identity. Beneath those papers was a sealed envelope addressed to Alina. Her name was on the primary investment contracts, and she had the right to know how her family's money was being used. Her envelope contained Julian's messages demanding retroactive approval, along with a short letter explaining that I had never agreed to assume liability, fund his personal debts, or give away my inherited land. An encrypted drive prepared by David contained the unredacted bank statements Alina's forensic team could verify. The final object was the original physical deed to the main coastal land. I placed it in a protective sleeve beside a note. Julian promised you collateral he did not own. I'm showing you the difference between a genuine asset and property taken through pressure. The deed remains mine. Inside the lid of the briefcase, I attached one last card. You asked me to make things right. I did. Before shipping the case via a secure corporate courier, I replied to Julian. I received your conditions. I will not attend the gala or complete any requirement for admission. An invitation does not create legal liability, erase a forged signature, transfer inherited property, or give you permission to commit fraud. A gift will be delivered during your keynote. After that, all financial and legal communication must go through my attorney. His response arrived 2 minutes later. Stop performing, you're coming. Then snorts he called 3 times. I declined every call. His voicemail said, Clara, this is not one of your engineering projects. You do not get to embarrass me. Mom and Dad have already told everyone you're presenting. Alina's father expects the deed tomorrow. Fix your attitude and call me. That revealed another lie. Julian had told Alina's father the land was guaranteed. Sarah sent a limited legal notice to the Rostova family attorney stating that I disputed all structural and financial obligations connected to Vance Horizon. Julian did not know yet. Dad appeared at my condo the night before my flight. He folded his arms and told me I had 24 hours to stop behaving like a victim. I asked whether he had read the 5 conditions. He said the details did not matter because galas were stressful. I asked whether he knew Julian had promised Alina's father the main land deed. Dad looked away. That was enough. He said Julian needed the leverage because the Rostovas expected our family to be fully invested. I reminded him about the forged PE stamp and the substandard concrete. You're the smart one, Dad replied. Why do you need to be so rigid? I had heard versions of that question for years. Why did I need my reputation, my boundaries, or my right to say no? Julian's needs were always urgent. Mine required justification. I opened the door and told him to leave. He warned that missing the gala would permanently divide the family. The family was divided every time you protected him from what he did, I answered. I'm simply no longer standing on the side that gets sacrificed. The next morning, David drove me to the airport. Relatives were already messaging because Julian claimed I had suffered a critical sight emergency. He had started rewriting my absence before I even left. I turned off the notifications, checked my passport, and watched my suitcase disappear onto the conveyor belt. For the first time, I did not feel like I was running away. I felt like I had stopped allowing everyone else to push me backward. The Swiss Alps did not erase my fear. During the flight, I repeatedly wanted to check my phone, call Mom, or ask Sarah whether I had gone too far. I imagined the family story forming without me. Julian was the nervous visionary. Our parents were innocent victims, and I was the bitter, rigid sister who chose a vacation over family. That story existed because I had protected it for years. When I landed in Geneva and took the train to Zermatt, the gala was 2 days away. I checked into a small, quiet cabin and listened to 23 voicemails. Most were from Mom. She said Alina was asking questions about the land deed, and Julian had become impossible to calm. She begged me to call before he said something he could not take back. Julian's first message sounded controlled. The company account needs the buy-in by noon Pacific time. Sign the transfer and we'll discuss your vacation later. 40 minutes later, he was shouting, You think you can hide across the world? You are responsible for this. You made a commitment to the family. In his final message, his voice softened. Clara, I'm your brother. Alina's parents are watching everything. If this weekend falls apart, I will never recover. Please don't do this to me. Even while begging, he described the consequences as something I was doing to him. I forwarded the recordings to Sarah and turned off my phone. The following morning, I hired a guide for a hike near the Matterhorn. I almost canceled, but staying alone with my thoughts felt worse. While we navigated a steep, snowy ridge, I kept reaching for the phone hidden in my pocket. The guide smiled and said, You cannot enjoy the mountain if you are looking at your boots. He meant the trail, but I understood. For 3 hours, I focused on the work in front of me. I did not feel magically healed. I simply felt present. When I returned to the cabin, Alina had emailed. Julian says you agreed to sign the liability transfer. and the delay is because you are upset about the dress fitting. Is that accurate? My father's legal team needs confirmation. Sarah had instructed me not to make unnecessary accusations, so I answered carefully. I did not agree to assume liability for Vance Horizon. I did not authorize any structural sign-offs. My attorney has disputed documents carrying my name. Ask Julian to show you the original digital file he claims I signed. Alina did not reply. An hour later, Julian called 12 times. Mom called 9. Dad sent one message. Whatever you told Alina, undo it now. That evening, David contacted me. Several cousins had forwarded screenshots from the investor group chat. Julian had changed the schedule but kept the on-stage presentation. He planned to clear up confusion about my absence and had told guests I was dealing with a confidential federal inspection. David asked whether I wanted to stop the courier. I could have canceled the delivery. The investigation would continue privately, and Alina would receive information through attorneys. I could avoid becoming the villain in every family retelling. Then David read another message from Julian. Clara understands that family loyalty comes before personal ego. Tomorrow, everyone will see how much she supports us. He was using my silence as consent again. Don't cancel it, I said. On the morning of the gala, Mom messaged that Julian had announced I was gifting the land deed and taking full legal responsibility for the resort's engineering. Alina contacted me again. He showed me a digital file with your PE stamp. He says your attorney is just creating confusion because you want more equity. Is that stamp yours? Sarah approved a direct response. No, I did not stamp it. Alina answered. Understood. I spent the day away from my phone. While walking through the snow, I realized how often I had treated anxiety as evidence of responsibility. Whenever Julian caused a crisis, the person who worried most became responsible for solving it. By late afternoon, I understood that guilt was not always a moral warning. Sometimes it was a habit taught by people who benefited from obedience. The keynote began while I ate dinner in a small restaurant in Zermatt. I did not watch the live stream. According to David, Julian took the stage to massive applause. He spoke about innovation and family legacy, but Alina looked tense, and her father remained on his phone throughout the introduction. The state licensing board's fraud division had contacted the Rostova legal team that morning. Julian still believed my briefcase would rescue him. At exactly 8:14 p.m. Pacific time, the matte black briefcase was wheeled onto the stage. The keynote began while I ate dinner in a small restaurant in Zermatt. I did not watch the live stream. According to David, Julian took the stage to massive applause. He spoke about innovation, family legacy, and building the future. But Alina looked tense, and her father remained on his phone throughout the introduction. The state licensing board's fraud division had contacted the Rostova legal team that morning. Julian still believed my briefcase would rescue him. At exactly 8:14 p.m. Pacific time, the matte black briefcase was wheeled onto the stage. I was asleep when it happened. Later, I learned the details from David, a partial audio recording, and Julian's frantic voicemails. Julian unlocked the brass latches, saw the brass plate, and smiled. The room applauded. He opened the heavy folder expecting the land deed and the signed liability transfer. Snorts Clara, you gave me 5 conditions for joining my company. Here is the only condition under which I will remain part of your life. You will never use my name, my license, my property, or my silence again. Beneath it was the state licensing board's notice of my compromised PE seal. Julian's smile vanished. He tried to close the folder, but Alina saw the independent forensic soil report printed across the next page. She reached for it. Julian pulled it away. Alina's father asked what he was holding. Julian laughed nervously and called it a private family dispute. Then Alina's sealed envelope slid out from the back of the folder. She picked it up before he could stop her. By the time she finished reading the first document, Julian's face had gone completely gray. Alina did not gasp. That made the ballroom even quieter. She stood beside the podium reading the forged digital sign-offs, while Julian whispered that the documents were being taken out of context. Her father asked one question. Did you forge her engineering seal, Julian? Julian claimed I had verbally approved everything and was now using a technicality to punish him because I was jealous of his success. Alina pointed to my written denial and the bank statements showing he had used the concrete funds to lease a yacht. Julian said I was unstable about money. That explanation failed because he had spent months presenting me as a respected, licensed professional whose support proved his company's credibility. Alina's father called his lead attorney, who had already been in contact with the state board. Julian tried to take Alina's phone. She stepped away and told him not to touch her. Our mother, who was sitting in the front row, approached the stage and said siblings often shared credentials for one another. She accused me of being vindictive because I disliked losing control. Then Alina read Julian's message aloud, the one ordering me to sign the liability transfer and wire $50,000 before the gala. Julian insisted the message had been edited. Alina's father told him to unlock his phone and show the original conversation. He refused. That refusal destroyed what remained of his story. The gala did not collapse in one explosion. It unraveled through a series of truths Julian could no longer control. Alina left the ballroom with her mother and her father's security team. Her father met privately with his attorneys. The keynote was canceled. The band stopped playing. The investors began filing out of the room. Julian moved between the remaining tables, claiming I had fabricated the documents because I wanted ownership of his company. Unfortunately, the state registry showed I had never been an officer. The bank files showed that he used my old college projects to secure the initial seed money. Every lie created another question. Dad called repeatedly. When I woke in the Alps, I had 41 missed calls. His first voicemail ordered me to tell Alina the briefcase was a cruel prank. His second accused me of destroying the family's reputation. Later, his anger became fear. The FBI had contacted him too. Julian had listed our parents as secondary investors and claimed they had pledged part of their home equity as backup security for the substandard concrete supplier. Dad remembered signing one preliminary paper because Julian said it was needed to reserve the catering hall. Julian had attached additional pages afterward. I sent one message. Speak to an attorney. Do not destroy anything. All communication with me must go through Sarah. Asterisk at the gala. Alina eventually returned just to collect her coat. She told Julian she was calling off the engagement and would be pressing civil charges for the misappropriated funds. Julian accused her family of caring only about money. Her father replied that the issue was fraud. Then Julian made his worst mistake. He said Alina's family could easily cover the debt and that he always assumed her father would step in once they were officially married. That's what families do for each other, Julian answered. It was the same sentence our parents had used on me for years. Spoken before people he could not control, it sounded exactly as selfish as it was. Alina left with her parents before midnight. Julian remained with our parents and a shrinking circle of relatives. The venue managers eventually asked them to leave after he argued with staff and demanded access to the VIP green room. He also searched for the main land deed, but the courier had already returned it to Sarah's office. By the time I returned from the Swiss Alps 12 days later, the consequences had spread far beyond the ballroom. Alina's family filed a massive civil suit for fraud and misrepresentation. Vance Horizon filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy the following week. An internal federal review found that Julian had exaggerated contracts, misrepresented assets, and attempted to use future family investment as collateral. The state licensing board permanently revoked his ability to act as a managing member of any construction firm. Sarah filed a civil action to recover the damages connected to the identity theft and the defamation of my professional license. Julian attempted to transfer his sports car and several business assets to a friend, but the transactions were easily traced and reversed. Our parents initially considered remortgaging their house to rescue him. Then their attorney discovered an email Julian had sent the concrete supplier. Asterisk, my parents will sign whatever I put in front of them. Just bill them if my sister doesn't pay. That sentence finally made them understand that his entitlement was not limited to me. Julian did not see family as people. He saw us as resources. His first direct message after the gala said, "You planned this because you wanted Alina to leave me. I hope the mountains were worth destroying your only brother." I forwarded it to Sarah. His next message warned that I would regret humiliating him. That also entered the legal file. 4 days later, his tone changed. He offered to forgive me if I withdrew the fraud claim, canceled the civil suit, and told the state board I had verbally approved the seal. He offered no apology and no restitution. A week later, he sent a crying voicemail. He said he might lose his condo, his company, and his freedom. He asked how I could live with myself. I listened once because I needed to hear the final proof that he still believed consequences belonged to the person who exposed him. Then I blocked him. The legal process lasted nearly a year. Julian eventually accepted a plea agreement involving wire fraud, forgery of a professional seal, and false statements on a federal lending application. He did not avoid prison. He received 4 years in federal facility, 5 years of supervised release, and was ordered to pay millions in restitution. His condo was sold. The sports car was repossessed. The sale proceeds repaid part of the Rostova investment and part of my legal fees. Alina's engagement was officially annulled. Julian also lost the social circle that had admired the successful image he built with borrowed money and stolen credentials. His downfall did not come from a magical document hidden inside a briefcase. It came from signatures, account statements, messages, and choices he had made because he believed I would remain silent forever. I stayed in the Alps for the full trip. I did not return early to manage the crisis, comfort my parents, or explain Julian to Alina. At first, doing nothing felt cruel because I had spent years serving as the family's emergency contact. But I was not doing nothing. I had reported fraud, protected my license, preserved evidence, and placed the case in professional hands. I simply refused to rescue the person who created it. Near the end of the trip, I hiked to a high alpine lake with my guide. He pointed to the massive peaks surrounding us and explained how the mountains only stood tall because their foundations were buried deep in solid bedrock, not loose sand. I thought about every sacrifice my family had called a gift. A real gift is freely chosen. It does not come through guilt, threats, forged signatures, or conditions for belonging. Snort's Julian had spent years renaming coercion as loyalty. I accepted that definition because challenging it seemed harder than losing my peace. The Gala taught me that a reputation purchased through self-erasure is not a reputation. It is just a liability waiting to collapse. When I returned to Seattle, David met me at the airport. There was no dramatic confrontation. I went home, unpacked, returned to work, met with Sarah, and rebuilt the parts of my professional life Julian had invaded. My PE license was fully reinstated with a formal commendation for my diligence. Alina contacted me after the civil suit was settled. She apologized for believing Julian's description of me and thanked me for revealing the truth before she combined more of her family's wealth with his. I told her she did not owe me an apology. Julian had created different stories for different people, each designed to make questioning him seem disloyal. We did not become close, but we parted with respect. My relationship with our parents was more complicated. Mom initially asked me to withdraw the lawsuit because Julian had already lost enough. I answered that losing benefits obtained through fraud was not unfair punishment. Dad apologized for confronting me at my condo, but his apology included explanations about stress and protecting the family. I told him I would not accept an apology that excused the same behavior it claimed to regret. We stopped speaking for almost 4 months. During that time, our parents attended counseling. When we eventually met, Dad did not ask me to forgive Julian. Mom did not say blood was thicker than money. They admitted that they had trained me to manage Julian and trained Julian to expect management. They also admitted that calling me, the strong one, had often been a convenient way to demand more from me. I did not restore the old relationship. I established rules. They could not discuss Julian's legal problems, deliver his messages, pressure me to reduce restitution, or appear at my home without permission. If they violated those boundaries, I would end the conversation. Mom cried, but I did not change the rules to stop her tears. Over time, she learned that boundaries were not punishments. They were the conditions required for a relationship that no longer consumed me. I recovered my professional standing completely. Legal fees consumed a part of my savings, but the money mattered less than the formal acknowledgement that my boundaries had always been valid. For years, my family treated written agreements and professional licenses as temporary obstacles that should disappear whenever Julian became uncomfortable. The federal judgment ended that fiction. Julian later sent an apology through his attorney from prison. He said he regretted that the situation escalated and hoped we could move beyond mutual mistakes. I did not respond. An apology without responsibility is only another request for access. I do not know whether Julian changed after losing his company, his fiancée, his freedom, and his reputation. Change is not something I can force, supervise, or finance. I only know that he can no longer use my identity, my license, my inheritance, or my silence to protect himself. People sometimes ask whether I regret sending the briefcase to the gala. I regret that Alina learned the truth in front of 500 guests. She deserved privacy, and I told her that. But Julian created the public presentation because he wanted applause for a liability I never promised. I sent the briefcase to the people directly affected by his deception. He chose the microphone, the audience, and the moment he opened it. My revenge was not screaming, destroying the stage, or delivering a cruel speech. My revenge was refusing to keep secrets that threatened my future. It was allowing accurate documents to speak in the room where Julian planned to use my name as proof of his genius. It was boarding a plane while he learned that the sister he considered rigid had stopped absorbing his consequences. The Swiss Alps did not solve my life, but they marked the moment I stopped asking whether protecting myself made me selfish. Sometimes, the person accusing you of destroying the family is simply angry that you stopped holding together a lie that benefited them. Julian gave me 5 conditions for joining his company. I gave him 1 condition for remaining in my life: respect my name, my license, and my right to say no. He failed before the gala began, so I sent him the truth, left for the mountains, and allowed him to open the future he had built for himself. Now, I want to ask you something. If your own family demanded your reputation, your money, and your silence as the price of belonging, how many conditions would you complete before walking away? Would you attend the gala, confront Julian privately, or send the same briefcase I did? Share your honest answer in the comments, because someone reading it may need permission to understand that saying no is not betrayal, and protecting yourself is not revenge. Sometimes, it is simply the first act of freedom.